Igor, an 8-year-old boy, was playing with his friends on a soccer field. He ran faster than everyone and was a happy child. However, when receiving the ball, his friend kicked it very hard, and the ball hit Igor's head. The boy fell, dizzy, on the soccer field. All his friends were worried because Igor didn't seem well. "Igor, are you okay?" asked Pedro, one of his best friends, with wide eyes full of concern. "He's not responding," shouted Lucas, running to call an adult. Soon, an adult who was passing by was called and quickly took Igor to the hospital. On the way, Igor looked out the car window, and everything seemed blurry. "Mom, Dad," murmured Igor in a weak voice as he tried to focus his sight on the hospital. His parents arrived and were deeply worried about him. Igor was still seeing everything blurred. "What happened to my son?" Igor's mother asked the doctor, almost in tears. "We need to run some tests, ma'am. We need to understand what's causing this blurred vision," the doctor replied, trying to calm her down. After several tests, the doctors found something alarming. The hit from the ball didn't cause the vision impairment. It merely revealed that Igor had a brain tumor. This tumor was pressing on the optic nerve, causing partial vision loss. "Doctor, what does this mean?" Igor's father asked with a pale face, full of worry. "The tumor is benign, but it's in a very difficult region to operate on. The chances of Igor not surviving the surgery are high," the doctor explained with a serious look. Igor's parents were devastated. They had to decide whether to risk the surgery so their son could regain his vision or let Igor gradually lose his sight but ensure he would stay alive. "We can't risk losing our son, but we also don't want him to suffer," said Igor's mother, holding her husband's hand. "Let's talk to Igor. He deserves to know what's happening and help us decide," suggested Igor's father. The parents explained the situation to Igor with all the care in the world. "Igor, what do you think? Do you want to try the surgery, or do you prefer to avoid the risk and gradually lose your sight?" his father asked with a trembling voice. I want to live," Igor replied with tears in his eyes as he held his parents' hands. Thus, the parents opted not to proceed with the surgery. Over time, Igor gradually lost his vision until he was completely blind. However, he never lost his cheerful spirit and will to live. "Mom, Dad, I can still play, just in different ways," Igor said one day, smiling as he explored the world with his other senses. Despite the difficulties, Igor adapted to his new life and showed incredible resilience, inspiring everyone around him with his strength and determination. The boy spent years adjusting to his new lifestyle. His parents hired a Braille teacher who taught him to read books. Additionally, they were guided by specialists on how to raise their son so that he could be an independent man in the future, even without his vision. The years passed, and Igor adapted to his new world. Now, he was a 28-year-old man. Igor worked in a company and had several colleagues, including some who shared the same disability. His best friend was Fabio, who was also blind. Fabio had been blind since birth and had an optimistic view of life. "You know, Igor, what I like most about life is that despite everything, there's always something new to learn," Fabio said one day during a break at work. "I agree, Fabio. Life always surprises us," Igor replied, smiling. From the office, Igor would go straight home to meet his wife, Claudia. At home, Igor hugged and kissed his wife. "How was your day, my love?" Claudia asked, caressing Igor's face. "It was good. Fabio and I worked on a new project. And you, how are you?" Igor asked, feeling the comfort of Claudia's embrace. "Everything is great. Clara was excited today. She wanted to show you a new dance she learned at school," Claudia replied, laughing. The couple had gotten married a few years earlier. Claudia was a wonderful wife and loved Igor. She helped Igor whenever she could to make his life easier, but she also treated him normally. She didn't see Igor's condition as something that made him less capable, quite the opposite. Claudia would say that Igor was one of the most intelligent and capable people she knew. After hugging his wife, he went directly to his daughter Clara's room, where she was playing with a doll. "Daddy!" exclaimed Clara, running to hug Igor. "Do you want to see my new dance?" "Of course, Clara. Show me your dance," Igor said, smiling as he sat on the bed to listen to his daughter's steps. His daughter was 5 years old. Igor had a happy and simple life. He never desired many material objects or riches. After taking a shower, he returned to his wife and mentioned that there would be a party at his company and invited her to go with him. "Claudia, there will be a party at the company. I'd like you to come with me," Igor said while drying his hair. "Of course, my love. I'll definitely go with you," Claudia replied, kissing him softly. Igor's life was full of love and happiness. He had overcome many challenges and built a wonderful family. The company party would be another moment to celebrate life alongside his beloved wife. The following night, Igor and Claudia got ready for the party. Claudia admired Igor, who was wearing a blue dress shirt and black pants, with a smile. "Igor, you look handsome," Claudia said, adjusting his shirt collar. Igor ran his hand over Claudia's face, feeling her soft features, and then touched her dress, feeling the soft, elegant fabric. "You look beautiful too, Claudia," Igor replied with a smile. Claudia smiled, feeling lucky to have married someone like Igor. She often considered herself outside the standards of beauty, and in her most intimate thoughts, she wondered if Igor would have chosen her if he could see her. The two went to the party with Claudia driving the car. At the party, they first found Fabio. Fabio greeted Igor with a hug and then turned to Claudia. "How are you?" "It's a pleasure to see you," Fabio said warmly. "I'm well, Fabio, and you?" Claudia replied, returning the smile. Claudia had been friends with Fabio before meeting Igor. It was Fabio who introduced the two many years ago. After chatting with Fabio for a while, Igor and Claudia mingled while Igor listened only to the cheerful and lively music that filled the room. At one point, Igor sat down in a chair, and Claudia said she was going to get a drink. "I'll get something for us, dear." "I'll be right back," Claudia said, kissing his forehead. Igor remained seated, listening to the sounds around him. His hearing was extremely sharp, and he could hear conversations that people assumed he couldn't. Just behind him, two co-workers began to talk, and he heard every word clearly. "Did you see Igor's wife?" one of them said with a tone of disdain. "Yes, she's very unattractive. How lucky she was to marry such a handsome man like him," the other replied, laughing. Igor felt a wave of irritation rising within him. To him, outward beauty didn't matter, but speaking ill of his wife made him furious. He clenched his fists, trying to stay calm, but his mind was racing. "Look, here she comes." "Be quiet," one of the women said, noticing Claudia approaching. Claudia returned with the drinks, smiling. "Here you go, Igor. I brought your favorite soda," she said, handing him the cup. Igor took the cup and held Claudia's hand for a moment, looking at her with a gaze full of affection. "Thank you, my love," Igor said in a soft voice, still tinged with emotion. Claudia noticed that something was wrong. "Is everything okay, Igor? You seem worried," she asked, sitting down beside him. Igor took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Everything is fine now that you're here, Claudia," he replied. They enjoyed the rest of the party in each other's company. For Igor, Claudia's beauty lay in her kindness, love, and unconditional support she gave him every day. And that was something no one could take away from them. One day, Igor woke up and noticed something different. Slowly opening his eyes, he realized he could see some shapes and forms around him. Though his vision was still blurry, it was more than he had experienced in decades. "Claudia," Igor called out with a trembling voice full of emotion. Claudia ran to his side, worried. "What is it, Igor? Is everything okay?" she asked, holding his hand. I think I'm seeing something," Igor replied, his eyes wide with surprise. Claudia looked at him in disbelief. "Really? Are you really seeing something?" she said, her voice filled with hope. Igor and Claudia immediately decided to go to the doctor. At the office, Dr. Almeida welcomed them and conducted a series of tests. "This is incredible, Igor," Dr. Almeida said with a broad smile. "It seems that the tumor in your head is shrinking. It's no longer pressing on the optic nerve like before. It's a true miracle." Igor and Claudia exchanged emotional glances. Igor's vision was improving for the first time in ages, and he was excited to discover a visual world that had long been denied to him. One morning, as he looked in the bathroom mirror, Igor clearly saw his own reflection for the first time in years. He was a handsome man with strong features and a gentle look. He felt a mix of emotions as he saw himself like this. "Claudia, come here," Igor called with a smile. Claudia entered the bathroom hesitantly, feeling insecure about her appearance. Igor turned to her and, for the first time, looked directly at his wife. "You're so beautiful, Claudia," Igor said with a smile. Claudia blushed, feeling uncomfortable. She knew she was overweight and didn't take much care of her appearance, but had always believed that Igor's love transcended those issues. However, now that he could see her, her old fears resurfaced. "You don't have to say that just to please me, Igor," Claudia replied, looking away. "I know how I am." Igor noticed the insecurity in her voice and took a step forward, holding her hands. "Claudia, I truly think you're beautiful, and more importantly, you're the woman who stood by my side, giving me unconditional support and love. That's what matters to me," Igor said, trying to cheer her up, but Claudia just shook her head, trying to hold back tears. It's just hard to believe. I always thought you only loved me because you couldn't see me. Now that you can, I don't know what to think," she said, her voice breaking. Igor hugged Claudia tightly, trying to convey all the love and security he felt. "Nothing has changed, Claudia. You are still the wonderful woman you've always been. My vision may have returned, but my love for you was never based on just appearances," he said firmly. Claudia smiled, still a little unsure but feeling the weight of Igor's words. Despite what he said, a small doubt lingered in the air, an uncertainty Claudia couldn't completely shake. Over time, she began to believe him more, and together they faced this new phase of their lives, learning to value even more the love and partnership that united them. However, as Igor continued to discover his new visual world, he maintained an indecipherable expression, leaving in suspense whether his words fully reflected his true feelings. As the months passed, Igor's life changed drastically. Now that he could see, he became a vain man and started going to the gym regularly. He took care of his body with dedication, seeking to stay in shape and further improve his appearance. Claudia noticed that Igor was becoming increasingly distant, but couldn't understand why. She missed the attention and affection he always gave her. Worried, she decided to talk to Fabio, Igor's longtime friend. "Fabio, I'm worried about Igor. He seems different, more distant. Do you know what might be happening?" Claudia asked, with an anguished expression. Fabio, always attentive, tried to reassure her. Claudia, maybe it's just a new phase for him. His vision returned, and that's a huge change. Give him some time to adjust. He still loves you. I'm sure of it, Fabio said, trying to comfort her. Meanwhile, Igor couldn't stop looking at himself in the mirror. He found himself very handsome and was attracted to his own image, spending long minutes admiring himself, adjusting his hair, observing every detail of his face and body. As he walked down the street, he noticed women's gazes on him, which only fed his vanity further. At work, Igor also began to notice admiring glances, especially from Larissa, the company's manager. She always found an excuse to talk to Igor, whether to discuss projects or just to chat. Igor, you're doing very well on these new projects. I'm sure your future here is promising, Larissa said with a charming smile. Igor felt flattered by the attention and couldn't deny that he liked it. At home, he spent more time playing with Clara. Now that he could see, he could engage more in the games and delight in seeing his daughter's excited face. "Daddy, let's play hide and seek," Clara exclaimed, running around the yard. However, Claudia felt increasingly left out. Igor seemed to dedicate all his energy to the gym, work, and playing with Clara. He had stopped kissing her and showing the affection that used to be so natural. One night, after putting Clara to bed, Claudia tried to talk to Igor. "Igor, I feel like we're drifting apart. You hardly spend any time with me anymore. What's going on?" she asked with a trembling voice. Igor looked at her, but his words were evasive. "I'm just focused on adapting to this new life, Claudia. It's all very new to me," he replied without really addressing what Claudia was feeling. Claudia felt lost, not knowing what else to do to reconnect with her husband. She wondered if Igor's regained vision had brought not only a new visual world, but also a new perspective that was slowly pulling him away from her. Meanwhile, Igor continued to be dazzled by the attention he received, not realizing the price this vanity was taking on their relationship. As his self-esteem and dedication to work increased, Igor was promoted at the company. The news of his promotion spread quickly, and Fabio, his best friend, was one of the first to celebrate. "Congratulations, Igor. I knew you'd make it," Fabio said, trying to hug his friend. However, Igor, absorbed in his new reality, barely acknowledged Fabio. "Thank you, Fabio," Igor replied distantly. Fabio, despite not seeing it, noticed Larissa's perfume in the air and felt out of place when he realized it was Larissa who was warmly hugging Igor. "Congratulations, Igor. You deserve this and much more," Larissa said with a suggestive smile. Later, Fabio tried to express his concern. "Claudia, I felt something different in Igor today. It seems like he's blind to his old friendships. He barely spoke to me and was with Larissa," Fabio said, with sadness in his voice. Claudia sighed deeply. "I've tried talking to him, Fabio, but nothing has worked. He's so distant, like he's another person," Claudia replied, downcast. Meanwhile, Igor continued to immerse himself more and more in his work, driven by the promotion. One night, he was in the office, enjoying the silence to focus. Larissa was there too, taking the opportunity to get closer to him. "You're working hard, Igor. That's admirable," Larissa said with a seductive tone. Igor tried to maintain his composure. "Thanks, Larissa. I just want to do a good job," he replied, trying to distance himself. Larissa got even closer, placing her hand on Igor's shoulder. "You deserve some fun too. How about we relax a bit?" she suggested, with a suggestive look. For a moment, Igor hesitated, but Larissa's seduction was too strong. He gave in to her charms and spent the night with her. He didn't return home, sleeping at Larissa's place. The next morning, Igor arrived home and found Claudia crying in worry. "Igor, where were you?" "I was so worried," Claudia asked with tears in her eyes. Igor was cold with her. "I was working. I had to stay late," he said without emotion. Claudia looked at him in disbelief. She knew something was wrong. "Igor, please talk to me. What's happening?" Claudia pleaded. Igor simply walked away and locked himself in the room. Claudia, still smelling a feminine perfume that wasn't hers, began to cry again, feeling lost, not knowing how to reconnect with the man she once knew and loved. Igor's transformation wasn't just physical but emotional. He was distancing himself from the people who loved and supported him, trading that love for the fleeting allure of a new life and new temptations. Claudia, realizing she was losing her husband to a version of him she barely recognized, became increasingly helpless, not knowing how to bring Igor back to reality. Igor woke up one day with a firm decision in mind. He got out of bed and went to the living room, where he found Claudia sitting on the couch with a serious and worried expression. He took a deep breath before speaking. "Claudia, I want a divorce," Igor said bluntly. Claudia felt her heart break upon hearing these words, but tried to stay strong. She looked into Igor's eyes with an expression of pain mixed with determination. "I knew that the moment you regained your vision, this could happen," Claudia said with a trembling voice, but trying to stay calm. "I thought you were different, Igor. I thought our love was stronger than this." Igor, seduced by the beauties of the world he could now see, couldn't hide the coldness in his eyes. Claudia, noticing the definitive change in him, felt betrayed and disappointed. "Claudia, it's not about you. I just want to explore more, see what the world has to offer," Igor said, trying to justify his decision. Claudia, with a sad expression, gave her now ex-husband one last piece of advice. "Igor, the most beautiful things in life aren't seen with the eyes, but with the heart. I hope one day you understand that," she said, with tears in her eyes. Igor gave a small smile, but it quickly faded. Claudia realized that this was no longer the man she had married. With a sense of sadness and disillusionment, she watched as Igor packed his bags. When he finished packing, Igor headed to the door. Claudia stood up and spoke one last time. "If you walk out that door, Igor, I'll move on without you. And if you regret it, there might not be a way back," she said, trying to give him one last warning. Igor looked at her without showing any emotion. "I won't regret it," he said coldly. He left the house, leaving Claudia alone. She stood there in the living room, feeling a wave of emotions: sadness, anger, disillusionment. Igor's words echoed in her mind, but she knew she had to be strong for Clara and herself. With tears running down her face, Claudia closed the door behind Igor. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to move forward. She realized that, despite everything, she still had Clara, her daughter, who needed her more than ever. Meanwhile, Igor, walking out of the house that had once been his home, felt a mix of freedom and uncertainty. The world ahead seemed full of promises and new experiences, but he couldn't avoid a slight discomfort that lingered at the back of his mind. He ignored that feeling, convinced he was making the right choice. Both of their lives would change forever from that moment on. Claudia, with a broken heart, would begin to rebuild her life, while Igor would explore the new possibilities his vision provided, without realizing that perhaps he was leaving behind the true beauties that cannot be seen with the eyes. Igor rented a house just for himself, a modern home with large windows and minimalist decor, reflecting his new independent life. Soon, Igor started receiving frequent visits from Larissa, who became a constant presence. But not only her. Other women also began frequenting Igor's house. With months of working out, his body became more athletic and attractive, drawing even more attention. Igor's vanity was at its peak, and he didn't regret separating from Claudia. However, he missed his daughter Clara, whom he visited from time to time. These moments with Clara were rare but brought a comfort he couldn't find elsewhere. Igor also resumed talking with Fabio, but the conversations were different. He felt they no longer had much in common. Fabio, heartbroken, realized he was losing a dear friend. Without Igor's constant presence, Fabio began to visit Claudia's house. Both were saddened by Igor's change and found solace in each other's company. At Claudia's house, Fabio, despite being blind, could hear Clara's soft sobs. The girl deeply felt her father's absence. Clara misses her father a lot. He rarely visits now, Claudia said, sadness in her voice as she stroked her daughter's hair. Fabio, always kind, tried to comfort Clara. "Dear, do you want to play hide and seek?" he asked, trying to cheer her up. "It's not the same, Uncle Fabio. You can't see like Daddy," Clara replied in a sad voice. Fabio smiled softly. "Let's try, Clara. I'm sure I can find you," he said confidently. Clara, hesitant at first, decided to give it a chance. She hid, and Fabio quickly found her using his keen hearing. "How did you find me if you're blind?" Clara asked, laughing. "I hear very well, Clara, and you make a lovely sound when you try to hide," Fabio replied, laughing too. They spent the afternoon playing, with Clara's laughter echoing through the house. Claudia watched the scene, feeling a joy she hadn't felt in a long time. Fabio's presence brought a lightness to her home, a sense that everything would be okay despite Igor's absence. Meanwhile, Igor continued to indulge in a world of fleeting pleasures. His house became a meeting point for many women, and he enjoyed his new unburdened life. But even with all the attention and the freedom he had longed for, there were moments when the image of Clara and her happy laughter crossed his mind, leaving an emptiness that parties and temporary conquests couldn't fill. Igor's transformation took him further away from his old life, but Claudia and Fabio, with their new routines, found ways to fill the void he left. The friendship between Fabio and Clara grew stronger, creating new bonds of affection and joy, while Igor, in his pursuit of the fleeting brilliance of the beauties he saw with his eyes, failed to realize that the truest ones were in the heart he had left behind. A few years passed, and Igor was still living the same life of excesses and superficiality. Despite being constantly surrounded by women and parties, he began to feel the weight of the emptiness that his life had become. Memories of his daughter Clara resurfaced more frequently. He hadn't seen her for at least a year, and these thoughts tormented him. However, whenever a new woman appeared, he distracted himself and soon forgot the past. One day, Igor received devastating news. The company where he worked decided to fire him for cause. He had accumulated several absences, besides showing up to work drunk and persistently flirting with his colleagues. He had to leave his job. With this, Larissa and the other women he dated lost interest in him. Financial difficulties began to arise, and Igor found himself with no options. Desperate, he asked Larissa for help, but she was direct. "I won't support a lazy man, Igor. Get your life together," she said without any compassion. Igor decided to visit Claudia and see how she and his daughter were doing. When he knocked on the door, he was greatly surprised. The one who opened it was Clara, now a 15-year-old teenager. His daughter was as tall as him, and he realized how much time had passed without him noticing. "Hi, Clara," Igor said hesitantly. Clara recognized him immediately and responded coldly. "What do you want?" she asked. The way she addressed him hurt. He expected to be called Dad, but she treated him like a stranger. Before he could say anything, Claudia appeared at the door, and beside her was Fabio. Igor felt an internal anger rise upon seeing them together. "What's going on here?" Igor asked, trying to control his anger. "Claudia, you're a traitor, and you, Fabio, I trusted you," he shouted furiously. Claudia, with an expression of fury, shouted back, "Traitor? You have the nerve to call me a traitor, Igor? You spent years without visiting your daughter. Clara cried with longing while you went from bed to bed. And the one who played the role of father all these years was Fabio. That's why she calls him Dad." Igor, overcome with anger and regret, looked at Clara, who now watched the scene from a distance with an indifferent look. "I just wanted to see my daughter," Igor said, his voice choked with emotion. "Your daughter?" Claudia retorted with tears in her eyes. "You have no right to call her that. Not after everything you've done. Go away, Igor. Rebuild your life far from here." Fabio approached Claudia, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Let him go, Claudia," Fabio said in a calm tone. Igor, realizing he had lost everything that really mattered, turned and left, with the weight of loneliness and regret crushing his heart. He walked slowly, tears streaming down his face, realizing that the choices he had made had driven him away from what truly mattered in life. Now, without a job, without Larissa, and without the family that had once loved him, Igor would have to face the consequences of his actions and find a way to rebuild his life, knowing that he might never regain what he had lost. For a few months, Igor tried to contact his daughter, Clara, but she didn't want to talk to him. His calls and messages were ignored, and Igor felt the weight of his past actions. Desperate for a chance at redemption, he kept trying. One day, Fabio and Claudia decided to talk to Clara about the situation. They sat down with her in the living room, trying to approach the subject carefully. "Clara, we know that Igor did many wrong things," Fabio began in a gentle tone. "But he's your father. Maybe you should give him a chance." Clara looked at them, her eyes reflecting the mixture of pain and confusion she felt. "I don't know if I can, Fabio. He left us, and it was you who was by my side all this time," Clara responded with a trembling voice. "I understand, dear, but sometimes people change and deserve a second chance." "Think about it," Claudia said, holding her daughter's hand. Clara sighed, slowly nodding. "I'll think about it," she said. Meanwhile, Igor was sleeping deeply in his small apartment. When he woke up, he noticed his vision was a bit blurry. A familiar fear took hold of him, reminding him of when he lost his sight years ago. Worried, he got in his car and drove to the hospital, where he underwent a series of tests. The doctor came with the news Igor feared. "Igor, another tumor is growing, probably related to your recent excesses with parties and alcohol," the doctor explained with a serious expression. Igor returned to his car and began to cry, crushed by the weight of his choices. In the midst of his despair, he received a call. It was Clara. "Dad, I'd like to go out with you," she said. Igor felt a wave of relief and hope. They went out and talked a lot, but Igor noticed the emotional distance between them was palpable. Clara was no longer as close to him, which made him deeply sad. After saying goodbye, Igor returned home. His vision began to worsen significantly, and he knew that he would soon be blind again. Despite this, he continued driving, refusing to accept the loss of his independence. One day, he needed to pick up Clara from a shopping mall. While waiting, he received a call from Larissa. "Igor, I miss you. Can we meet?" Larissa said, her voice sweet but with a tone of manipulation. Igor found it strange, but the memory of his moments with Larissa and his vanity made him accept the invitation. He drove to her house, completely forgetting to pick up his daughter. Larissa tried to seduce Igor, but he noticed something was wrong. The room was spinning, and he began to lose his sight completely. Terrified, he tried to leave, but his vision was gone. Igor ran blindly, unable to find his way. Desperate, he called Clara, asking for help. She arrived quickly, finding him disoriented and crying. She helped him into the car and took him home. "I'm sorry, Clara. I got lost," Igor said, his voice trembling. "I'm disappointed in you, Dad. I thought you wanted to reconnect with me, but you went to see her," Clara said, her tone firm but hurt. Igor was speechless. He realized that his obsession with superficial beauty and Larissa had blinded him to what truly mattered. "Clara, forgive me. I lost sight of what really matters," Igor said, crying. Clara was silent for a moment, then responded, "I'll stay with you, Dad, but I don't know if I can trust you again." From that day on, Igor's life changed drastically. He lived with Clara, but she kept a certain distance, only staying by his side out of pity and duty. Igor, now blind again, depended entirely on her, but he knew he had lost her trust and affection. One afternoon, Clara left Igor at home alone, as she needed to buy some things. While alone, Igor started reflecting on everything that had happened. He regretted deeply everything he had done and the choices that had led him to this point. The realization that he had destroyed the most important relationships in his life weighed heavily on him. But there was nothing he could do now. He was alone, and the house was silent. When Clara returned, she found Igor sitting in the dark with an expression of deep sadness. She sat next to him, silent, not knowing what to say. Igor finally broke the silence. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I was a terrible father, a terrible person. I wish I could go back and change everything," he said, tears streaming down his face. Clara looked at him, her heart torn between anger and compassion. "I know you're sorry, Dad, but some things can't be undone," she replied with a heavy heart. They remained silent, the weight of the unspoken words between them growing heavier. Igor knew he had lost the opportunity to be truly happy. He had chased after fleeting pleasures and superficial beauty, but in the end, he was left with nothing.